Wondering what life is really like on Canada's wild and crazy West Coast? This podcast is all about the people, the places, and Vancouver Island time. Together, we'll explore this island paradise, a combination of ocean, city, and country living. We'll meet the fabulous locals, such as the Fudge Fairy and the Chicken Lady, who have chosen Victoria and Vancouver Island as their home. And we'll learn what makes this place unique and special to those who live here. And now, your host of Vancouver Island Time, Jane Johnston.
Hi everybody, it's Jane Johnston with the Briar Hill Group at Remax Squamson and host of Vancouver Island Time. I'm here with Marty Erletz. We're going to be talking about his business, which is Pillar to Post, as well as the area that he lives in, which is Tillicum, which is in the Saanich West area if you're searching through our Matrix MLS system. So, you're not originally from Victoria. What made you move out here? You came from Edmonton, right?
From Edmonton, that's correct, yeah. So, my wife and I had lived in Edmonton I lived in Edmonton all my life, and there just comes a point where you're just tired of the climate and things that, few things that maybe Alberta stands for that we didn't love, and we decided to try to make the move out west and try to make a go of it, and it's been the best decision we've ever made. We've been here for 10 years now and absolutely love it.
So, did you have a job when you came?
Yes, actually, I worked for Pillar to Post in Edmonton, and I ended up finding the exact same position here, working for my predecessor before I bought the company from him when he retired.
So one of the things that people say when they move to Victoria, and I actually think it's true of any city, is that it's hard to meet people. Have you found that?
At first, but I mean, it's like anything else. If you don't get yourself out there and try to meet people, then it's not going to work. But I'll tell you that now that I've lived here for 10 years, I've made some long-term connections with people that I feel are going to be lifetime friendships and things. I find people in Victoria and West Coast people to be very incredibly warm, loving people that are really easy to get along with once you get on their wavelength. So.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I've made a lot of really good friends. What about in terms of the area that you live in? So Tillicum is just directly north of downtown. It's got the highway on one side, it's got Burnside on the other. You're between the Gorge Waterway and the highway. What do you think about this area?
I love the area. I love how central it is. For me as a home inspector, it's very easy for me to get around. I'm always going opposite of the traffic in the morning when I do have to go for a home inspection out in Langford or something like that. It's really convenient for my wife as well because she works down in downtown, so it's a 6 or 8 minute drive for her to kind of get where she needs to go. So we do love the central aspect of it.
And you're right near the recreation center?
Yeah, right near Perks Recreation as well, which is fantastic, yes. And Tillicum Mall, of course, the theater. I mean, there's so many good amenities over here for sure. So
do you actually go to the theater anymore?
I do. Every now and then we go to the theater. I mean, we do have a 3-year-old, so it's kind of hard sometimes to get out to a movie, but it is nice being able to just, shoot down to the theater if we ever have childcare and go catch a movie for sure.
And what about in terms of finding babysitters around here?
Well, we're pretty lucky because we love all of our neighbors and all of our neighbors love us and they love taking care of our sons. So it's we're pretty lucky with that end of things for sure.
One of the things I notice when I drive around this area compared to other areas is the lack of sidewalks in Saanich. What do you think about that with having a 3-year-old?
Well, that isn't necessarily the easiest thing, that's for sure. I've noticed that too, that obviously the bus routes have sidewalks and we don't. There has been chatter that we may get sidewalks on this street in the next couple of years, so that's hopeful. It's just, when you walk, right now at this point for us, we just, kind of take our son in the stroller until we get him to a place that's safe to go and things like that. But it would be nice to have sidewalks, that's for sure.
So you live in an area that to me is kind of in transition. When I first came to work in real estate here in 2006, this was not the nicest area. But I would say, well, actually, I know I did a market analysis for a house on Walter, which a client ended up not buying, and I'm sure they're kicking themselves because it was $450 at the time. So what do you think about this area? Where do you think it's going?
Well, yeah, it's taken a lot of a big turn since we've lived here 10 years ago for sure. When we moved here, a lot of people had told us we weren't necessarily living in a desirable area. There were a lot of cheaper rental properties that, with a bit of lack of maintenance and things like that. But yeah, in the last 10 years, I mean, a lot of younger families moving in, doing the work to their houses and making really nice places for themselves. And it's really, really helped the neighborhood. And like I said, it's I love living here because of that, and I love the fact that people are starting to take pride in their properties and things like that around here for sure.
So one of the secrets I always tell people when they're looking in neighborhoods to determine if it's changing over is to look at the roofs, because if you can see a roof and if it has an old 15-year interlocking T thing, it's a really crappy roof. If they have the nice, do you look at that?
Oh, well, of course, I'm a home inspector, so I'm always looking at people's roofs. And it's funny you say that, because my neighbor across the street has had some wind damage lately, and I don't want to be too pretentious and go talk to her about it, but I feel like it's kind of my obligation to go say, hey, maybe you should get your roof looked at, because it's the only one around here that's not very good.
Okay, we're being real estate snobs here.
A little bit, yes.
So what do you do with your 3-year-old in terms of activities? So I know that I used to bring my son and daughter to the drop-in at the Perks Arena. Are there other activities for kids under the age of 5?
Yeah, the drop-in is nice. There's also a dad group that meets at Perks Arena on Saturday mornings. That's kind of cool to bring your kids to. We spend a ton of time outside. The Cuthbert Homes Park, directly behind Tillicum Mall, is just a fantastic system of trails. A lot of there's owls and other birds to look at, and of course we have the little channels for drainage back there where there's a lot of ducks. So it's a place that I before my son was around, I used to take my dog back there basically every day. It's my happy place in the neighborhood for sure. And now it's just really fun to let my son just kind of run around back there and jump in mud puddles and pick up sticks and meet dogs and other friendly people. So it's really good. We also have Meadow Park, which actually has a playground for kids as well. And we're also really close to the Gorge Waterway, which is fun because, again, it's just a nice place to go walking and strolling, and there's a nice park along there as well. So definitely a lot to keep ourselves busy if you want to spend some time outdoors.
So do you ever go to Curtis Point?
No.
That's a big rock that overlooks, it's right by Tillicum. It's on the south side of the bridge and is where a lot of people tend to hang out in the gorge in the summer and sunbathe.
Oh, that area, yeah. So a neighbor of ours actually likes to go do his polar dip on New Year's Day, and that's generally where he goes over there. It's to go dip in the water in the gorge on New Year's Day, and we like to go watch him, get really cold and jump in the gorge, which I think is silly, but it's his prerogative. So
what about for adults? So you lived here, I think, for 7 years before you had children. What would you do as an adult to entertain yourself around here?
Around the neighborhood, well, I mean, there used to be a lot more coffee shops actually around here. So right now we do have a couple of those. And as I mentioned, definitely the theater and things like that. But, really I'm a homebody, so I spend a lot of time in my yard. I have a nice big yard, and, I really like, doing yard maintenance and spending time out there. And I'm a car guy, so I spend a little bit of time in my garage working on my Volkswagen as well. So, but the neighborhood, I mean, really people just, again, love being close to the Gorge Waterway and to the park, and just when it's a beautiful day, it's just fun to just walk around and hang out. There's a lot of other young families here with kids and things like that too. So
tell me a bit about cars. And so see the smile on his face.
Yes. Well, I'm an all-around car enthusiast. I've been into cars my entire life. Growing up in Edmonton, there wasn't a very big Volkswagen scene because a lot of air-cooled Volkswagens don't have heaters and things like that, so it's not very easy to use those in a colder climate. But around here, there's a massive Volkswagen following here. People are very loyal to the brand, and I got myself involved in the Victoria Volkswagen Club. I'm now the vice president of the Victoria Volkswagen Club, which is a lot of fun. We put on a big car show here every year. It's one of the bigger ones on the West Coast as far as Volkswagens are concerned. And I love, it's my downtime and my happy place is when I'm in my garage tinkering away on my Beetle.
So do you find, for me, when I moved here, first of all, so I came in 99, I found that there were a lot more older vehicles in Victoria than elsewhere in the country, just because we don't have the salt on the road. Well, we do this week, but we don't have the salt on the road right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the older Hondas and things like that generally rust out in all the other provinces are generally tend to be in very good shape around here. And the same thing with the older Volkswagens too. You can find a 50 or 60-year-old car with virtually no rust, which is pretty amazing when you're from other parts of Canada. That's for sure.
What about do you know anybody in like the motorcycle industry? Or
I don't really know too many people. I know a couple of realtors who like to drive motorbikes, but yeah, no, I'm not really into the motorcycle thing. I've never really been into I'm a bit too much of a chicken to try riding a motorbike. I like to keep it on four wheels. I'm not very coordinated, so.
I do find, so there are, if you go around, there's women, I think it's called the Roar or something, Women Who Roar. They have a group on the island, and you can go and ride your bike and do trips. And because it's so temperate here in the summer, it's quite easy to get around. Okay, so talking about getting around, any road trips you take in your Beetle?
Well, I actually, my Beetle was a 9-year project that I actually just finished last year. So I drove it for the first time last summer. The first time I showed it was actually at our Volksfest show that happens in July. And its very first maiden road trip was to go to the Great Canadian in Vancouver, which happens in August. And that was the very first time that the car was on the ferry. And I took it to Vancouver and made it back. And made it back without breaking down. So that was fantastic. I do plan on taking it to a lot more shows this year. Hopefully there's one up in Nanaimo that's really good. There's a show in Parksville that I'm planning on probably heading up to as well. So definitely going to do a lot more now that the car's reliable and ready to go.
What are your favorite places to visit on the island?
That is a good one. I mean, I really like going up to Parksville. It's very beautiful up there. It's a bit of a, I guess, it's interesting when you grow up in the prairies, around here, it's like the distance is close, but the time to get there tends to take a while. So going to Parksville is very nice, but again, it's always a time commitment. And the same thing with going to Tofino. It's such a beautiful place to go. It's just, the access isn't, it's not something you can just run out and really do a day trip. You really want to have to commit to it. But I just really enjoy going to the local beaches and things like that. Esquimalt Lagoon is one of my favorite beaches to hang out at. And again, it's a very dog-friendly, when we did have a dog, it's a very dog-friendly place to take your dog and just let him run free, which was fantastic. And, there's also awesome sand there, which is nice because a lot of the beaches in town are quite rocky. So it's nice to find a sandy beach. I
don't mind a rocky beach because you don't get rocks in your bathing suit.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't really, I find the ocean, I'm a bit of a chicken with the water too. It's a little too cold for me to actually go in, so I prefer just to sit on the beach and soak up the rays.
So the water temperature here actually averages around 11 degrees, and I think it goes down to 8 in the winter, so it is quite cold.
Yes, and I know it doesn't fluctuate very much, but it's interesting because on a hot day, you think it's really hot and you want to go for a dip in the ocean, and you get down to the ocean, you realize that it's actually still a little on the chilly side. So,
do you go to any of the local lakes?
Well, yeah, again, when we had a dog, we used to go to Thetis Lake all the time and walk around the trails around Thetis Lake because it's a great walking trail, nice little commute there. And, for the past couple of years, we haven't really done a lot with that, but I'm definitely planning on taking my son out to some of the lakes and let him dip his toes in and do the trails out there for sure.
So around here near the theater, there's some places to eat like Montana's, and they're somewhat unique. Are there places that you've ever gone to eat for dinner that you really enjoy?
So the El Greco restaurant actually is really good Greek food. We tend to just order, it's very close to here, so we tend to just pick it up and bring it home kind of thing. But it's really amazing Greek food. I don't really go to the Montanas too much, but also in Tillicum, there's a little Korean or Vietnamese place that serves really good food. So same thing. We just we tend to eat out, but definitely eat at home, like order in and bring home kind of thing. So so not necessarily, there's not a lot of really good like foodie restaurants in this neighborhood. You kind of have to go a little ways away to find that. But now especially with skip the dishes and things like that, I mean, anything's at your fingertips, so it's very easy to eat well. And there's so many good restaurants in Victoria, it's ridiculous.
So, do you do skip the dishes here, or do you go out?
No, we definitely do skip the dishes. Again, when you have a 3-year-old, you don't go out as much as you used to before you have a kid, and it's not always as easy just to jump in your car and run out to a restaurant. So
give it 10 years.
Yeah, exactly, and then they'll want that for sure. Yeah.
If you were to give a list of top 3 things for people to do while they're visiting, what would they be?
Visiting Victoria in general. Drink awesome coffee and drink awesome beer, because we have both of those in abundance here. Again, check out the beaches and the sites. There's just so many amazing, unique places to check out as far as scenery and being by the ocean, or we have oceans and lakes, which is great. And yeah, just enjoy the island lifestyle, the laid back lifestyle that we have around here is really great. You can lose yourself in the culture here without worrying about the hustle and bustle of life all the time. So that's, again, coming from a big city, that's what I really, really love, is everybody's, on their own. They call it island time, and it's true. And you notice it when you're not from here. And I love island time. It's fantastic.
That's why we call it Vancouver Island Time.
Exactly.
All right. So if you want to know more about Vancouver Island Time, check out our other podcasts and vlogs at vancouverislandtime.com. We're going to be back with Marty. He's going to be talking about his business, which is Pillar to Post. It's a home inspection business. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Vancouver Island Time is brought to you by the Briar Hill Group at Remax Camosun, Victoria, where we bring local expertise and global presence to your property.
Hi, everybody. It's Jane Johnston with the Briar Hill Group at Remax Camosun. We're back with Marty Erletz. He's going to be talking to us about Pillar to Post, which is his home inspection business. So I will tell you, Marty, that I attend probably 50 inspections a year. You're one of the better inspectors, so thank you. I have seen really weird stuff, like people poking holes in walls. They bring radar guns and stuff like that. First of all, how long have you been in the business?
So I've been doing home inspections for 15 years. I started in 2005.
And when did you buy Pillar to Post, the local franchise?
I bought the Pillar to Post Victoria in 2012 from my predecessor.
And so, first of all, what's the biggest misconception people have about home inspections?
Well, I think that two of the biggest misconceptions is, one, we're either going to pass or fail the home, which just isn't true. As you know, as a realtor, we're just there to report on the condition of the home and give recommendations. So there's never a pass or fail. And the other one, I suppose, is that people kind of think we can see through the walls sometimes, which we can do, or maybe have a crystal ball to tell them, how long things are going to last. And obviously, again, it makes it a bit of a challenge for people in our industry.
So for, let's say, a 2,000 square foot house, how much is an inspection?
Well, we have a tiered inspection package that we offer. So, but your base inspection is going to be around $425. And then if you wanted to upgrade to do an infrared scan, it would be a bit more than that. And then we also do indoor air quality testing as well. It's really important here on the West Coast, because we do have a lot of houses that might have ventilation or condensation or humidity problems and have a bit of mold. So we're able to test for that as well for people.
It's funny, I met some realtors who were from the desert, and they have these things called swamp coolers.
Oh, yes. That's essentially what we call Legionnaire's disease in a can, is essentially what those can be, for sure. Yeah, we really, and it's interesting too. We have a lot of heat pumps in town, but I mean, generally they're more for heat and less for cooling. We don't typically tend to need the air conditioning a whole heck of a lot in our climate, which I'm a big fan of personally.
Yeah, I find people here, it's interesting when they're looking, they come from elsewhere in the country. They're like, well, do you have a heat pump? Yes. Well, how about air conditioner? Because the two can be separate, right?
They definitely can be separate. Yeah, absolutely.
So they say, do you have air conditioning? I'm like, you don't really need it, because we're pretty
moderate temperature here. Yeah.
So, what do you think when you're looking at a house here? So you're looking top to bottom, roof, plumbing, wiring, foundation. What else are you looking at?
Well, we go through the entire house, actually. So, yeah, we start off by going through the major systems. We start outside and look at the landscaping and the decks and the exterior of the home and the roof. Generally, then on the inside, we check the attics and, do the electrical. And then if there's a crawl space, we tend to get the big systems out of the way first. And then when we're done reporting on the major systems, then we just kind of go through the house and we check lights and plugs and do, use our moisture meters in the bathrooms and operate the appliances. So, I mean, really, we're checking the entire house out for sure. Giving recommendations on anything that we see. Obviously, the age of the home depends on how particular the inspection is. We're not talking about a lot of cosmetics on a house that's 110 or 120 years old. Whereas when we're looking at newer homes, we're not really dealing with a lot of general deficiencies. So we're focusing a bit more on the cosmetics and things like that. So we kind of gauge our inspection on the age and condition of the home for sure.
So there's always hot topics in inspections. Since I've been here, we went through the wiring problem, which is still an issue in old homes. The aluminum wiring problem, which is another issue. So the first one was knob and tube, then we moved to aluminum, and now we have issues with asbestos. So how do you handle that? So you go up and you see asbestos in the attic. What's your next step?
So first of all, again, just as more of a general liability, we would never actually tell people that they have asbestos. We would recommend that they get it tested. But yeah, it's one of those things that they definitely have to be aware of. As you know, in the past 8 or so years, WorkSafe BC lowered the requirement for what's considered asbestos-containing material, which has opened up a lot of the drywall, stipple, and things like that. So really what it comes down to is a customer awareness that they do, it's something that they're going to have to deal with. So if they want to, take a wall out of their between their kitchen and their living room, it might be a $5,000 thing to do, but if there's asbestos products in that wall, then automatically it's going to cost a heck of a lot more money, because we're going to have to bring in an asbestos abatement team and do what we need to do. So most of the time now, if a house is pre-1990, we just tell people that if they're considering renovations, that they should get a hazmat survey, and the hazmat survey is going to let them know kind of what they're dealing with in the home.
What's the price of a hazmat survey?
It can generally be between about $800 and $2,000, but the average price for a hazmat survey is about $1,200, and they're just going to come through and test everything that would be affected in the area they're considering doing a renovation for.
Right. And I should clarify, it's not generally you would see asbestos in the attic. I go to lots of houses and I see asbestos wrapped around pipes and on heat registers, and the insulation is usually a vermiculite, which may contain asbestos, right?
Yes, and there's a very, very good chance it's going to contain asbestos, and most companies now don't even test the vermiculite anymore. They just say there's such a good, strong possibility of there being a trace amounts of asbestos in the vermiculite that we're just going to recommend removal.
Right. Yeah, so actually, you remember I was telling you about the guy who bought near here, or who was going to buy, his attic was full of asbestos, and he went and removed it all himself.
Yeah, that's not generally something we recommend that you do. Yeah, it's there's two trains of thought behind it, a single exposure to a product versus long-term exposure to a product. But when it comes to things like asbestos or really anything that becomes a safety issue, it's always going to be best to bring in the proper people. And yes, it may cost you, extra money to do that. And you may have to spend money removing your hazardous insulation out of your attic instead of replacing your countertops. But, your countertops aren't life-threatening, if you're disturbing that product. And again, it's important to know that with asbestos, is if you don't disturb it, it's not a problem. But it just makes it really hard to do anything in your home if you have the product in there. And anytime you're going to do a renovation, you would have to deal with it. So generally, it's best to...
Yeah, usually you'll find it in linoleum or maybe the drywall tape, or some places where you just don't expect it. In fact, one inspector I know was doing an inspection, and they were all talking about the attic, but he said, you guys have missed a big picture here. It's all over the exterior of the house.
Oh, yes, definitely. It can definitely be in some forms of stucco. A lot of stucco products does have asbestos. And of course, there's also essentially asbestos exterior tile that can go on the home that is basically the only product in it is an asbestos product. Now, it's a ridiculously durable product. It's probably one of the longest lasting low maintenance products you're going to have on the outside of a home. So again, if you have it and you leave it, it's great. But if you have to deal with it, then it becomes, obviously it can be a bit of a pain.
Okay, let's talk plumbing. Poly B.
Poly B. So, well, the interesting thing about Poly B is as the insurance company really has seemed to have gotten their back up again about it lately. But the thing about Poly B in Canada is we don't really have a history of failure the way they have in the States. And that has a lot, the failures in the States mostly had to do with heavy chlorination of water.
And temperature, right?
And also temperature and also water pressure. So those are the things that have caused the fittings on the Poly B piping to fail. Whereas, especially in Victoria, we have some of the best water water quality out there, so we don't really have to do a lot of chlorination. And we regulate our water pressure very heavily here. We don't let our water pressure exceed kind of 100 psi, which is always good. So we're finding poly B in homes that is still in perfect condition. I did an inspection yesterday of a 1992 home, and the poly B was just like new.
Right. So one of the things you have to make sure is that you have the brass fittings between the pieces of poly B, right?
That's correct. Brass fittings instead of plastic, and copper crimp rings instead of aluminum crimp rings. That's correct.
Okay. Aluminum wiring.
Aluminum wiring is a perfectly safe product as long as you deal with it properly. It's like most things, you know, you can go on the internet and drive yourself crazy with the amount of horror stories that you read from people doing things. But at the end of the day, it's a completely safe product as long as it's dealt with properly. Most insurance companies now are just requiring you to pigtail your connections, meaning adding a short piece of copper onto the end of the aluminum, and then that just makes the entire circuit act like a copper circuit and is no longer a hazard. But the same thing, we don't generally have too many documented cases in Canada about any type of massive failure of aluminum wiring.
Right. And so the main issue, though, is oxidation of the wire, which creates fire, right?
Oxidation generally is one of the ones, and the other one is high thermal expansion. So that actually would be a bit more of a fire hazard because it expands and contracts a lot more than the copper. So if it's connected by a screw over time, the wire expands and contracts enough and works the screw loose, which can cause an arcing, which can be a fire hazard.
So actually, that's also the problem with poly B, I heard, in Florida, is because the expansion of the pipe going through, because they had their poly B going through attics, whereas we tend to have it going through the basement. So we have more regulated temperature.
Absolutely. Yeah, attics can get so hot, and they keep their air conditioning units up there and a lot of their piping in the attics, because a lot of places there are just on slab. And the difference between Florida and here is their slabs are all engineered and have big steel cables running through them. So they just can't run pipes through their slabs like we can. So they tend to go up and through. And yeah, the temperature differential can be a big problem for sure.
Okay. Renovations without permits.
Probably the number one thing. If somebody asks me what's the number one problem we see with homes, anywhere, but especially a lot of times here in Victoria, is definitely unqualified individuals performing renovations and just doing not a very good job, and it generally comes to the point where it's unfixable, and generally you have to take it all down and start again. So at the end of the day, you're spending your money twice instead of paying somebody to do it right the first time.
I also think that people should really use a designer when they're renovating their house, because I just see poor design choice. Like, maybe you see, like for instance, I saw, a wall where now people wouldn't have a wall, or people put a bed in the middle of the room, so it's just floating out there. Different design choices, I think, that make a difference. If you have a professional help you, they can even talk about like how your kitchen is structured, where your sink and your dishwasher should be, and all of that. Just practical.
Well, and generally designers also can have a basic idea of what wall might be load bearing, or what issues there might be. People always want to take out a wall, but they don't consider there might be plumbing, electrical, anything, and there might be a pivotal wall to the structure of the home, and then they have to take it out and then add a beam, which is going to cost a whole lot extra more money. So yes, definitely a designer. I kind of feel a little bit like our home and garden television shows are give people a little bit too much confidence sometimes. It's great to be able to do it yourself if you have the ability, but if you're don't just wing it if you don't really feel comfortable with doing it. Definitely hire somebody to do it right the first time.
Yeah, I think probably one of the reasons why people do it here is because our building industry right now is so hot, it's hard to even get people.
Oh, it's just about impossible. I mean, even when you call a handyman to do a small job, they're generally booking weeks in advance. So yeah, people tend to get frustrated with that type of thing, and just, again, they just think that maybe they can do it themselves. And sometimes they win and sometimes they lose.
Okay, so how do people get in touch with you?
So there's a few different ways you can get in touch with me. My website is victoria.pillartopost.com. The easiest way, of course, is going to be by phone. Our office number is 250-385-4000, and that will take you to a lovely lady named Aretta, who does the inspection booking for us here at Pillar to Post Victoria. You can also email me at marty.erletz@pillartopost.com.
How do you spell your last name?
Erletz.
Erletz. Okay. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. I've learned a lot. I'm hoping they've learned a lot too. And if you want a really good qualified inspector, call Marty. And again, your number?
250-385-4000.
And he speaks fast, but you can't understand him.
Yes, that's one of my faults, I suppose, is speaking too fast. But thanks a lot for allowing me to do this with you. That was fantastic.
Oh, no problem. If you want to join us, you can do it too. Go to VancouverIslandTime.com, go to the bottom of the page and click on Be a Guest. We'd love to have you. We'd love to highlight your area and your area of business. So chat with you soon. Welcome to the neighborhood. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to the neighborhood. We hope you have had some insight into West Coast living. If you know of someone or someplace that should be highlighted in our podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Please go to VancouverIslandTime.com and click on our Connect button. See you next week on Vancouver Island Time with Jane Johnston.